What's on the silver screen? I got some takes you wouldn't believe. Popmosis Film.
Hello and welcome to the newest episode of Popmosis Film. This is your host Tyler for this episode, and full disclosure, I said Popmosis Jones on the last run, but I'm going to go ahead and just steamroll through this. And joining me today for Iron Man 2008, the original MCU film, is
Paul. How's it going?
And Josiah.
Alrighty, welcome, gentlemen, as always, as we are here to talk about like I said previously, the beginning of the MCU, a big milestone, and honestly, in Hollywood, in film, in Robert Downey Jr.'s comeback. I mean, everything. This film is essentially a culmination of something that has become so impactful to society and just film in general. And Iron Man, of course, came out in 2008, directed by Jon Favreau, produced by Avi Arad and Kevin Feige, with a screenplay by Mark Fergus, Hawk Ostby, Art Markham, and Matt Holloway. So a lot of people's
and real
hands.
Quick, real quick about the writers. Mark Fergus and Hawk Ostby, they're a team. They actually wrote Cowboys and Aliens for Favreau as well after this.
Oh.
And also Children of Men. They did Children of Men, which I think is just a super fantastic film. And the book is not that great. So they plus the director's name escaping me. He's fantastic.
Alfonso Cuarón.
So they like fixing a lot of things because the Cowboy and Alien book was terrible. The movie wasn't that great, but it wasn't like bad. It was just kind of like, all right. If you read the Aliens or Cowboys versus Aliens comic book, it is horrendous. It is almost unreadable. That's how bad it is. And then the Children of Men was not great. And to me, Iron Man wasn't even that great of a character. At least when I was growing up, I didn't really care about it.
I would agree.
Except for Demon in a Bottle. Like Demon in a Bottle was like the one thing that was like, okay, Iron Man's legit, and they made him way more interesting in the film. So okay, good on them. And then
in the other pair of writers, Art Markham and Matt Holloway, they wrote Punisher Warzone, which came out the same year. So it's kind of like a very forgotten Marvel film. When it's funny because that same year, Hulk came out like a month later.
I love Punisher Warzone.
Punisher Warzone is a good movie. I actually like it as well.
Oh my god, we need to do that one too. Okay. Oh man, we have to do that movie eventually. Okay.
Yes, but it's just funny because like it's whatever you think about it, good or bad or in between, it's certainly the forgotten Marvel film of 2008 for sure. It's
true.
Like the lost film of Marvel. I mean, it was not exactly part of the cinematic universe by any stretch of the imagination, but Hulk that same year and Iron Man, that's all you think about. And then there's
Dark Knight.
I mean, plus it's the year of Dark Knight, so like forget you Punisher, even a good Punisher, and it is a good Punisher movie. So
yeah. Absolutely. It's the only good Punisher movie, in my opinion. And
maybe you're not much to work with otherwise there.
That's true. And then Iron Man, of course, is created by Stan Lee and starring Robert Downey Jr., Terrence Howard, Jeff Bridges, Sean Toub, and Gwyneth Paltrow. And they don't have him listed, but they also have Agent Coulson, or why am I forgetting his name?
Clark Gregg,
who is awesome. And also with and this film came out May 2nd of 2008 at 126 minutes and with a budget of $140 million with a box office of $585.3 million. That is a lot of money, especially back in 2008. So
yes, and certainly beyond expectations at the time.
Absolutely.
That character in particular. So that was a smashing success for that.
So we start.
And real quick to correct Tyler, to be that guy, but you can't just say Stan Lee created.
That's true.
Iron
and
Man.
Jack
You
Kirby.
got to credit Jack Kirby, who did the original design. Also Don Heck,
yes,
who was the original artist. But also Larry Lieber, Stan's brother, who was the guy who Stan did. I think, from what I understand, Stan kind of handed Larry the plots for the most part. But Larry Lieber was the writer on Iron Man.
Oh,
so
cool.
Those issues, which kind of tells you even then that Iron Man was a second-tier character for Marvel if Stan's not handling it, if Jack's not handling it directly. Those two guys aren't on it. It's a B book. That just tells you what you need to know in terms of...
like I said in the comics, I didn't care about him until Demon in the Bottle, and then they had him in Civil War, and I was like, okay, you're getting my attention. And then the movie came out, and that just like
exactly.
And so I guess let's start off with this discussion talking about at this time, 2008. We are one movie in with Batman Begins, with The Dark Knight about to come out, which came out after this film, 2 months after this film. And you also have the failures of Fantastic Fours. You have and Spider-Man 3 that just came out. So with this film going into it, because I'm guessing all three of us watched it in theaters, what were your thoughts going into this film?
Well, when I first saw it, I just I didn't think anything of it. I had some free time, and I thought, some people recommend Iron Man to me, and I was like, Robert Downey Jr. is pretty good. I saw Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and he was really good in it. So I was like, okay, well, I'll check it out. And when I saw it, I was just blown away.
Yeah.
How it was perfect for the part in every single way, and I had I didn't really have much familiarity with Iron Man, and I only saw the 1992 animated series.
Yeah,
really
not the top notch of Iron Man, but as a 10-year-old in 1992, I loved it. Say that,
yeah.
But
I never
I watched the first episode of that last night after I watched Iron Man, just to go back, because really, like Paul's saying, that was my main touchstone for Iron Man, other than some comic books, but not a ton. And I was like, oh wow, this doesn't hold up.
Absolutely.
So,
Paul, what were you
not
saying?
like the X-Men 90s show, which really holds up. But go ahead, Paul.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So it was just like a really cheesy cartoon, and I was like, you know what? I'll just watch this movie. I'll kill 2 hours. And what I was really looking forward to was Dark Knight. And
absolutely,
over time, it really grew on me, and it became. The funny thing about 2008 is that you have DC probably at the peak with The Dark Knight, and then you have Marvel just kind of starting out with Iron Man, and they kind of went on very different trajectories from there.
Yeah.
After the Nolan trilogy, the DC universe kind of fell apart. Dark Knight Rises was good, but it wasn't as good as The Dark Knight. And then Marvel Universe really kind of picked up. They had a rough sophomore period with Iron Man 2, but they really picked up. And then maybe Thor was kind of rough, but they really picked up with
you and I disagree insanely.
And Avengers, and it really they took off, and they became this, they changed the landscape of film.
I would say though, what Paul's kind of getting at is whatever you think is that first phase of Marvel was certainly very uneven. In terms of the movie,
exactly.
Especially with what it became, and it's they were clearly filling things out. But what worked about all of those, what worked about Iron Man, why it lands, is Marvel got it right, and it's because Kevin Feige was the guy who said the characters are there. I was at a conference for the Producers Guild. I'm in the Producers Guild, and last year I was at the it's probably going to be canceled this year actually because of COVID-19. But at that, I was at the Kevin Feige sort of thing, and he was basically just talking about a lot. When people would ask about Iron Man, it was kind of the behind the scenes sort of stuff, and he talked about how it was hard to get the completion bond for the film because it was an independently financed film. It was a huge budget independent film. They produced it on their own.
Yeah, they produced it with Paramount being the distributor.
Yeah,
at the time.
Paramount. Yeah. And at the time, I didn't know that at the time. I see Paramount logo. You assume it's a Paramount picture, but no, they just distribute it, and they did it up until Avengers. And Avengers was the first film Paramount didn't distribute.
Yep.
But part of their deal, which was the weirdest deal ever, is they still had their logo out front, even though Disney distributed it. And I don't think Paramount made any money on Avengers, but their logo was out front.
Honestly, if Disney had bought it and that was part of the deal, where an insane amount of people were to see the Paramount logo, I would have done it. I would have been like, yeah, I'm happy with that too. If I was Paramount, I would be very happy.
To be fair, they probably would rather have kept distributing the movies. But anyway, what Kevin Feige said at the conference was he talked about he started on the X-Men films because he was working for the Donners company, and he said that as a like a lower level associate producer, they spent years trying to crack the X-Men as a film, trying to figure out how to make it work. And he was the one who showed them like a comic book that had character profiles in it because they couldn't understand the characters. He's like, the characters are here. It's about characters. It's characters that make it work and in relationships. And that was what has stayed with Marvel through whatever you think of each individual film. It's usually character centric. It's like a big action movie, whatever, but it's character centric, and that's the one thing that's always been consistent in the movies. It centers on that character, and when you get that right, you can maybe play with other things like change an origin story element, or in this film, for example, make Obadiah Stane his dad's business partner that we'll never ever mention again after this movie, but still he was his business partner. So, but that was what a missed
opportunity too.
Yes.
But, I mean, I think with this discussion, I think we should definitely stay away from any other MCU film. I think we can definitely reference this, but I think we should also keep it because, again, they wanted to make this into a big thing, but they didn't know if it would or not. They didn't know if this was going to be a flop and a big mistake. This and The Incredible Hulk. The Incredible Hulk was not getting good traction, and it wasn't getting any good press as well, and they were really worried about it at the time. So with Iron Man, they literally thought it was just going to be these two movies, and then they were out. And everything else was left to hope. But I think, Paul, you had one more thing you were going to say, though.
Oh, I just think the funny thing is, like, I didn't have any familiarity with Iron Man, and I grew up with Batman, like Batman the animated series. Like, I've loved Batman most of my life.
Yeah.
And now I would much rather watch something Iron Man than a Batman movie.
Really?
It's like completely switched around where, something I grew up with, I don't really trust as a property in the same way I trust Iron Man, because the best thing you could ever do to me is like change my mind about your product, your movie, whatever it is. Like I came into Iron Man with no expectations, and it like almost became like a lifestyle for me. Like I bought so many Iron Man things. Like right around then, I was collecting like Hot Toys. And to this day, I buy like Iron Man stuff all the time.
Wow.
I love Robert Downey Jr. And like, it's funny how just that year was such a turning point for like comic book movies. And those two movies in particular, like, are really important.
Yes.
To changing that landscape.
Those two movies shaped, I think, what comic book movies and the standards are now, which is why comic book films since then, regardless if they're well known or not, are sink or swim. Where you have films after that like Snowpiercer that nobody really read about, and people who do go in, at least people I know and I affiliate with, basically went in with basically going in with Marvel and DC standards and being like, am I going to be disappointed or am I going to be happy? And like, and it's weird. And also, like, to play on what you're saying is like it created a whole stir as to how people viewed things that said based on comic blank. So and I agree, Josiah. But you going into Iron Man all the way back in 2008, what were your thoughts? What were you expecting?
So going in, I don't know. It's hard to say what I was expecting. I don't think I was expecting much. Not that I thought it would be bad, because it looked good. The hype was good. It was a movie that I was excited about.
Yeah.
But it was a movie that I didn't have an expectation for because my affiliation with the character was just kind of secondary. He was a member of the Avengers. I liked Tony Stark as the character, and I liked him more interacting with those other characters. So I was almost, once I went in, I was just wanted to be entertained with the movie. But I was, very much every comic book movie came out, I was going. At that time in my life, I was going to every movie, every weekend that came out. That's what I did then. And I remember specifically I saw it at AMC Century City in LA, where I also saw Batman Begins. And those were two movies that kind of pushed and changed comic book movies, for sure. And I saw them essentially in the same theater. And so it was really, really cool for me but going in, the expectations were low. And that's why it can work. It's a fantastic movie and it's still very, very good. But if it didn't work, there's less of a risk because it's Iron Man. I mean, obviously there's the risk financially, but from an audience perspective, as long as it didn't bankrupt the early Marvel Studios, they could have regrouped. As long as they made money on it, they could have kept making movies.
Absolutely.
So it wouldn't have killed them if the people don't like that character, whatever it is. So there's less of a risk, and I think that was why it was a smart move to go there. And at the same time, though, the reason they went there was because they didn't have a lot of their top characters. Those characters were Spider-Man at Sony, the X-Men at Fox, Hulk. Even they brought him in, but he was actually at Universal.
Yeah, and
that
Fantastic Four is Fantastic Four is also with Sony. It's insane.
Like, the Fantastic Four, the movie you think would launch the Marvel Universe as it launched the Marvel Universe in the 60s, they couldn't even do that. So, yeah, they went with a slightly more obscure character, but it was also very of the time. Like, for the last however many years, you could argue we've been very technology obsessed as a people, and more so as we're home, we can't go out, and we're on our phones and things and interacting. We're doing this through technology. We're not meeting in person due to circumstances. And I think Iron Man is the right character for that. For even the time we live in now. I mean, that was 12 years ago. He resonates then. He resonates now.
Yeah. We were in the middle of two wars. We were in the middle of fighting terrorists. We were in the middle of like, who is the bigger stick? Absolutely.
I mean, it was even like the original character. Like Stan Lee literally said, "Let's create a character who is." Because there was within Marvel, the early Marvel comics, it was popular with the college crowd, the early hippies, kind of like into the young intellectuals, sort of that those people were into those comics. And he said, "Well, here's the person you should hate the most. He's a war profiteer, and I'm going to make him one of my superheroes." He wasn't like that Spider-Man teenager or Captain America, the man made of granite. Like, he was a war profiteer, and they played, and it's a beautiful play on a character where he should be awful, and he should be awful in many ways just as a person, but yet you really like him. And then they also humanize him, and that's largely because of Robert Downey Jr., which I'm sure we'll talk at length about. But
absolutely,
just I was watching just kind of random interviews and things on YouTube and stuff about this, and I saw Jon Favreau talking about why he wanted Robert Downey Jr. And, there was every movie he was on, he had to have there was extra insurance and all this stuff at that time. So he was definitely a risk from a financial point of view, because it cost you more money to get him. Not just his salary probably wasn't much at that time. I think from what I've heard that Terrence Howard was actually the highest paid in the film because he was coming off an Oscar nomination, I think, for Hustle and Flow.
Hustle and Flow,
yeah.
I don't know about that. I think Robert Downey Jr.
I've heard that from Terrence Howard.
Not
personally,
wow.
But
not
personally. Terrence Howard just over here telling me stuff, right?
Yeah,
he's hiding behind the crates over there.
Yeah. I'm in a garage with Terrence Howard. I'm in my sister-in-law's garage with Terrence Howard. That's what I understood. But regardless, he's not getting the insane money that he would later get for playing this character. And because of those added insurance costs and things like that, he was more of a liability. So there would be some people that are trying to finance something that would steer away. But Jon Favreau said he wanted him because he is Tony Stark. He's battled addiction. He also, the interesting thing was, he said, like Tony Stark is someone who grew up in the public eye. So every mistake he makes, you're aware of it. You know what Tony Stark has screwed up when he was 22 and this and that. Every mistake he's made, it's on Newsweek, whatever magazine. It's on the news. It's on CNN. And so that's Robert Downey Jr. in real life.
Absolutely.
He was on Saturday Night Live when he was a kid. His dad was
he got kicked out of
right?
Saturday Night Live. Yeah.
Yeah. He was on what was known as the worst cast ever in 1985, I think. So, but
I think he lasted a whole season. I think it was just a couple episodes and then he got fired, right?
I think it was on a whole season though. I don't know how much they might have used him, but I think then they blew up that cast because I think that was then they got Lauren Michaels to come back and kind of reboot the show, and he then just never left. So, but anyway,
with Iron Man though, my thoughts going in was I was all Batman. I've always been DC. The only Marvel properties that I knew anything about was Thor. That was the only thing I would read. Thor and Daredevil were the only two characters.
So you read the only thing more obscure than Iron Man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I see that's the weird thing. I don't think Thor was as obscure as Iron Man. Because Thor showed up and did I just remember Thor being on so many different random things constantly, but I mean, maybe that's just me. But
I would say so because Iron Man was always like the one leading the Avengers, and Thor was
oh
like
yeah, that's
on
true.
the Avengers.
Yeah,
That's kind of how I viewed it. You know what I mean? It was like Cap or Iron Man leading, and then Thor was like the muscle in a sense.
yeah, that's true.
So.
Yeah, and I think so. Like, why Thor was because I was so obsessed with Greek and Roman mythology, and so my mom was like, "Well, here's a comic book of Thor," because there wasn't any of Greek and Roman mythology, minus Wonder Woman, which I was already reading because I love DC. And so I started reading so Thor and Daredevil, knowing really nothing about Iron Man until maybe a couple of years before, when my friend was like, "You need to read Demon in a Bottle. You have to read this. This is one of the best things that's ever happened in comics." And so I read it, and that's why I was like, okay, I know Tony Stark is a really messed up person. So my thoughts going into this film, knowing about Robert Downey Jr. at this point, because I was studying film and I was doing a little bit more research, and then when he got casted, I looked into him, and I was just like, this is like perfect casting for Demon in the Bottle from what I had read before. So my thoughts going into this film was, this is a very destroyed, very self-destructive character, and who's looking for to rebuild himself. And Robert Downey Jr. definitely hits every single mark that I can even think of. So I was extremely excited going into this film, not knowing any ramifications as to what the hell I was watching, because I literally just thought this was going to be a one-off. And I actually didn't even know, like a lot of people, none of us knew that Incredible Hulk was going to be connected to it. Nobody knew about it until somebody leaked a couple weeks before about the post-credit scene. That was the only time people talked about them actually being connected, because I think they even, if I remember correctly, like Kevin Feige and a couple other people from Marvel were just saying, yeah, we're just making these movies for fun. And there's no, and like they were basically like deflecting any connections or anything like that. So me going in, I just thought this was going to be a fun movie of an Iron Man character that I don't know about. Maybe I'll get to know him a little bit more outside of this really depressing, insane story from the 80s, and like, halfway through, from the creation of him to where we were at that point. And so that was my thought going into this film. Luckily, I was even more blown away than I could even imagine. And so my whole thing is asking you guys is, now that we've had the success of Marvel, we've had an insane growth, and just a cinematic universe. I don't think I can even say it in other words. Going back and now rewatching this film, the ground, the concrete, the what's it called, the foundation of this whole thing. Now that we've watched it, what was it like rewatching this film?
Better than Green Lantern, the last film we watched. I'll say that.
Oh God!
I just had to throw one last bit of shade at Green Lantern. That's it. Okay.
I think we should just throw shade at Green Lantern for the next 3 episodes, just to get the bad juju off of us.
Just get it out of the system. It's in there. Go ahead, Paul.
I'd have to say, in the first 5 minutes, I was like relieved to watch like a good movie that like made sense and like I care about the characters. And I was like, oh, thank God, a good movie.
Yeah.
Like, it's not going to be a nightmare. But yeah, I just, I equate okay. So I was thinking of this analogy. Marvel is like In-N-Out Burger. Like, whenever you go, always a solid, good burger, so great. DC's like Arby's. Like, you go there and you're like, what did I do to myself? What is this?
See,
shit that I'm trying to eat?
I disagree. I think that's a completely different podcast, because I think DC has made 4 bad films out of 15, and like, man, I disagree with that. I think they're
okay.
I think they're both different. Just completely different, which is why with Feige in this film. But yeah, sorry.
Oh no,
I just kind of want some Arby's now. I don't know, man.
Yeah, no. I honestly, I don't like getting now all that much. So maybe anyway, no. But okay. So I definitely understand. So let's talk about the movie, the film itself. The film, starts off with an introduction of Tony Stark. We have magazine covers and all these other things as well, establishing this guy's way better than all of us and richer, and will never ever be anything like him. The whole cold opening, I guess, which is him going through the desert with some soldiers, and the whole selfie thing, and getting his sarcasm, his sense of humor, his his cynicism, So I don't know. Like, I mean, do you have anything you want to say about?
No, I was gonna say, yeah, the writing at the beginning, the writing throughout is really good because that's and there was a lot of improvisation in this movie. From what I understand, from what I've gathered, is I think they kind of had the plot points kind of laid out, but they didn't have sort of the character moments necessarily filled in, and that's where some of the acting and improvising. I did read one thing where Gwyneth Paltrow in particular was a little bit overwhelmed with Robert Downey Jr.'s improvising because he's so quick that she would try to keep up, and they shot it with 2 cameras because of that, so that they could get these things and get coverage on everything, so they can get, because if you're improvising, it's hard to recreate that if it's on the fly. So that's why they were shooting with 2 cameras. But that moment at the beginning, I think it just distills perfectly. You get his character so quickly. You get the humor of it. You get, like you said, the cynicism of him. And you get that, like, I didn't even think about, like, all the magazines and stuff, because it's that exposition at the beginning, but it quickly gets that in there so that you understand who he is. And it's that thing where when you see it at that moment, you're like, oh, this guy is the worst. But then as the film goes on a little bit, you're like, oh my gosh, that's a burden. That's a burden. All that stuff is a burden. It's that, like, quote, burden of celebrity. But it really is in this case where his genius is a burden because all these people have all these expectations of him, of who he should be, of how he should behave. And that, and expectations from his father that he could never keep up to. And you get all that so quickly.
I will say this about the film. They do a very brilliant job sprinkling this whole thing about his father in there so much to where it really just hits you in the face and you understand that he is the way he is solely to live up to his father. Like, solely.
Yeah.
He's not even Tony Stark. Like, he really is just the son of Howard Stark. And so yeah, I like that you said that. What about you, Paul? The beginning of this film.
Piggybacking off of that, it's like the whole time he's like living in the shadow of his father's legacy, and then towards the end of the movie, he creates his own legacy. And I love that character arc.
Yeah.
That he goes through.
I mean, and with this film, so we go off to where the convoy truck, he gets turned over, he gets kidnapped.
Or the Funvee.
Huh?
The Funvee, yeah. The
Funvee. And so anyways, I think we can skip from, like, the demonstration and the, the Stan Lee cameo and a few other, like, the beginning is great. It's character building, understanding him, where he's from, the world that he lives in, how he's surrounded, and everything. And for me, the beginning of this film isn't until he wakes up in the cave. Honestly, the rest of it is great. I mean, the beginning of it's amazing, and I love it. But, like, for me, the film doesn't really start until the cave, and I don't know. How do you guys feel about that?
I think that's where you then, I would say, I feel like it obviously starts where it begins with the other stuff, but that's where that's where the true character of Tony Stark starts to come out.
Yeah.
You establish the jerk Tony, the persona that is Tony, that Tony puts on because that's what is expected. Yeah. That's built up, and he is in peril to the point of dying and death, where he has to have Yinsen puts the thing in that is pulling the metal away from it so it doesn't go into his heart, and the car battery has to sling over his shoulder. He is facing death, and even then, he's still kind of a jerk.
Yeah,
he's still kind of.
I mean,
standing up. You
don't lose
Stark.
It like that. I mean, like if you live that life, you don't just lose it. But I mean, that's a coping mechanism. It's kind of the same thing. Again, I don't really want to talk about the film too much, but, like, the same thing with Rocket, where a lot of people were really, really upset with how Rocket was so mean to Thor in Endgame, where that's his coping mechanism, is where he hurts and he's verbally abusive to people that he cares about and he loves. He has lost his family and now has adopted a new one, but he still misses and wants to find his old family. So yeah, he's fat shaming Thor, but I don't think he means it. And I think, and a lot of people hated it, where I loved it because I think it sucks what he was saying, but him saying it is a very powerful thing for me and showing me, and the power of coping mechanisms and what is not correct behavior. Same thing with Iron Man in the cave, being so, still being kind of an asshole to the guy keeping him alive and translating and making sure that he's not dying, and helping him as well.
So. Yeah, and the great thing is Jensen, that character, like, he's the one who draws out the human in Tony, the Tony
Yeah.
that's there, that Tony has pushed so far down and away
Yeah.
because of those expectations before how he feels he should behave. The Tony that becomes Iron Man, when Iron Man and Tony Stark are one, when he is Iron Man. This is where it starts. I mean, and not just like in a sense of he's physically building armor. It starts in the sense of this is who he becomes.
Yes. Yeah.
He changes here. And I wouldn't even say he changes. He finally stops acting that way.
He's understanding because he sees that these terrorists have Stark products. They have Stark weapons, and he's seeing that now, his stuff going towards his own country to protect his country is actually doing the opposite and is actually in the wrong hands, about to do an ungodly amount of damage. And now he's seeing that basically everything is not black and white. Not everything. He's not doing anything great. He's actually helping out both sides. And yeah. I mean, I don't know. How do you feel, Paul, about basically the whole cave thing up until before the escape?
Well, I think the that intro where they kind of talk about him growing up and then his father dying, all of that. He went to MIT and he graduated when he was 17, all of that. I really like that because it establishes his character, like how resourceful he is, how intelligent he is. And then we get to see that demonstrated when he escapes that cage.
Yes.
Or the cage. He fashions an arc reactor, a little tiny arc reactor to remove the shrapnel from his heart. He fashions the Mark I. He's able to negotiate with 10 Rings, the leader, not to kill Jensen, that he's a good assistant. And so it's so much of the character development, so I like that how they really play off their strengths early on in the movie.
Absolutely.
And by being so resourceful like that, you admire him and you're you are really enthralled with his journey early on. And it's only when they're in the cave, it's only 10, 15 minutes of the movie.
It's really,
and you're already
really
just
surprisingly early on.
Yeah. But I love how very streamlined that whole 15, 20 minutes is, that you get so much character development and you really just resonate with the character in just a short amount of time. So
it also shows you the Yinsen moment you mentioned where he saves him. It shows how he's almost learning how to use the cocky persona of Tony Stark to then do something with it, where because there's a moment where when he thinks he's going to be really hurt, he reacts naturally. He's no, he screams out, and then he's he restrains himself and he's I need him. You just that casual flippant tone, and it's great character stuff where he's learning how to use it to do something good, which is becoming Iron Man instead of creating Jericho missiles to kill everybody out there, because the more people using them, the more money he makes.
He's using his composure to essentially, instead of hurt people, to actually save people. Is what kind of what it is. And and it goes on to the whole building scene. He's plotting to build the Ironmonger, not the Ironmonger, sorry, the Mark I, and and also try to also save his friend. And of course, you learn more and more about his whole family's gone and everything, and you get to know about the town as well that he grew up in, and all of his family's gone. Also, I think it comes back and plays into later in the film, and so. He's kind of understanding the ins and outs of the 10 Rings, and that they have a lot more of his stuff, because they take him out and he gets to see all of the Stark weapons that they have accumulated, and it's also very apparent that they're not just stealing it. I think there's a line in the movie where he just kind of realizes this isn't stolen. And so, and of course, later on in the film, when he's talking with Obadiah, and I think, he was are you selling this stuff under me? Because I think he comes back knowing somebody's supplying them with it. And so, which later on, as before we start talking about Obadiah, he basically everything unravels, and to a big twist. And so, kind of, and so, so we have him building. You see him early on again in this film that he is really, really good with his hands. He's really good at just building things. Like him leaving that cave to building an Iron Man suit a week later, it actually kind of makes sense. He's really, really good at building things, and now we get to see that. We get to see his ritzy life. We get to see he gets to stay and do whatever he wants to do. He's an amazing salesman, but more than anything, the guy is an engineer, technologically building genius, and so, and I got to give him props, like how much of this character we understand in like 20 minutes. It's insane.
Yeah, and he's like, I really realized watching it again, he's his most true self when he's making something.
Yes.
And
yeah.
Later points when he's just making something. And to call back to another movie when going way ahead in the most recent Marvel movie in the Spider-Man Far From Home is when Happy sees Peter doing that as well, and he sees that that's Tony. He's making something. He is like not even like planning it or using it like the Iron Man suit, but making it, hammering away. And I got chills watching him hammer because of like the resonance of that. Like when he's hammering away, like I had chills watching it this time, and that was a different experience. I've seen this movie dozens of times. I don't even know how many, and that moment caught me so off guard as being profoundly emotional in the context now of 22 movies, right? Or
23 movies with Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yeah, with Spider-Man.
Paul, go ahead.
Oh, actually, going off of that, there's like a scene where he has a holographic gauntlet, and Tony puts it on. And that same scene, a scene exactly like that is in Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yeah.
Where he does exactly the same movement with his arm, and then he kind of drags his gauntlet over exactly like that. So
again, like, so we're going through this whole motion of understanding who he is, and then he escapes, and it's badass. It is awesome. It is insanely well done and choreographed. I would be terrified being a stuntman in that place with with fire going everywhere and explosives in a very small. That was a very small space, like outside and everything. Like I would be terrified being a stuntman, to be honest, because like like maybe just a little bit too much gunpowder or explosives could have really messed something up in that entire set. If somebody didn't measure something correctly. I think it is a brilliant display of destruction and like one of the coolest escape scenes in film. Honestly, I really love it. It's pumping, has a song, it's awesome. I mean, how do you guys feel about just the escape of, with him in Mark 1?
Can I point out two things before I move on?
Yeah, of course.
Just two things. One thing I noticed is that right before, like with everybody before Jensen, like Tony Stark looks out in the distance and never like meets anybody eye level. Like he never looks anybody in the eye.
Yeah.
He is always just reacting to people or just, talking non sequiturs. And then Jensen's the first person that he sees eye to eye, and he has like a mutual respect. I noticed that because I watched Iron Man like I don't know,
think I've ever noticed that. That's awesome.
The first time I noticed that. And then also the second thing, which I thought was really clever, is that when they're both in the cave working on the Mark 1, every once in a while they cut to like closed circuit television footage, with the like scan lines and everything that the terrorists are looking at. And so it subtly kind of like gets the movie grounded, that you kind of believe that this guy could build a suit of iron and an arc reactor. So I just want to point out those two things before we go further, because there's kind of...
I love that.
And one thing the use of that sort of surveillance camera thing, it also kind of shows very small character moments too, where you can see them interacting and getting along and becoming friends. And Tony doesn't really have many friends. I mean, other than Rhodey, it seems, but it's used in a different way too. But yeah, it totally grounds it.
And he even admits that to Jensen. He says he doesn't have anybody. And then Jensen says, you have everything and you have nothing. I was like, wow, this is such a great line.
Geez, comic book movie, all profound on us here.
The movie is a great line. And I also love that actor very, 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 very much.
Yeah, a few years before that, he was absolutely the best thing in Crash. Crash is kind of there's a lot going on. Some of it's good, some of it's a mess, but his story and his performance is probably the best thing in the movie.
Yeah.
He's fantastic.
And then in a couple years later, I think he's the only one who tried in The Last Airbender. He's Uncle Iroh.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I've never seen it.
So. Oh, you were so lucky. We're gonna be doing that on this podcast.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
And so we're going through the whole escape and understanding he's back home. And I will say that everything from back home, this movie does something that I think most comic book movies just don't do well. It is to me, the pacing, the storytelling is just consistent the entirety of it. There's not one point where it's too slow or too fast. I don't think there's any dull moments. And I think it just does a really great well where it like the transition from like Act 2 to Act 3 is just like it doesn't even feel like that there's like an Act 2 and Act 3. It just feels like it's just like all one. Like where he's attacked,
yeah, totally.
where he goes saves the village, where he is confronting Obadiah Stane, where Pepper, or also like Pepper is infiltrating Stark Industries, and in that scene with her and Obadiah, and we'll go back and talk about just the casting as well, but I just want to point out that this movie, after the cave, after the escape, it just turns into this amazing, great, like, action adventure film that I think I've always wanted.
Though, actually, after the cave, it slows down significantly for a bit, but it's not a bad thing. And it's funny because I wrote in my notes, I'm like, he doesn't become truly Iron Man until like an hour into this movie, and I don't care. Because it's so good because of the character he's literally building it, and it's so enjoyable to watch him make Iron Man and figure things out and test things and fail and go through this process to becoming Iron Man, that it's so organic. And the pacing is really good. It's really good filmmaking, but it's like the kind of thing that in another movie this would be boring. You know what I mean? Like it just would not land, but here it totally does.
Yeah, and how the hell did they give personality to an armed robot? Like a robot with an arm.
Yeah.
Like how did they give? How did they get? Like, and I will say this.
It's a character that they'll bring back in other movies. It's so good.
When you see it, when I saw it again in Iron Man 3, so my girlfriend and I did a rewatch of all the MCU at the beginning of the quarantine, and we watched through all of them. When it comes back in Iron Man 3, I literally choked up, and I'm just like, what is wrong with me? But this movie does so well. So we'll talk about the characters now. So now we're introduced more to Pepper Potts. She gets a little bit more of a personality outside of just saying that she throws out the trash. And now you get to understand a little bit more of Rhodey, the best friend, who is very fed up with Tony Stark. It's the most abusive friendship I've ever seen in my entire life.
It really is. It truly is.
And then you get creepy Obadiah Stane. And a little bit of an intro to to one of our favorite characters, Agent Coulson, and so we have.
I thought our favorite character was the robot arm, Tyler.
No, I'm talking about just in the MCU.
I know.
Oh yeah.
I know.
or at least until Avengers. And spoiler alert. And
one thing, like that dummy, that little mechanical arm.
Yeah.
He's way more engrossing a character to me than like Aquaman, like by far. I think that's so bad. I know we're gonna get so much hate, like comments, like
especially since I love Aquaman.
Oh really? Well, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Oh, we'll watch that movie too. That'll be a 3-hour-long episode. I'm just kidding. But
just Tyler talking.
I'm down.
Go ahead. Let's talk about. I would just love a moment. You talked about. I want to go back to is the relationship with Rhodey and Tony.
Yeah.
It's like you said. It's the most abusive relationship, but it's one of those things where I think watching it again in this movie in particular, you can see why Rhodey and Pepper are loyal to Tony. Is because they know and see the real Tony when other people don't. They see Tony the mechanic. They see Tony the builder. Like when Pepper will come down and see him working on something, and she'll do some weird thing and attach this contraption, like the scene where she has to reach into the chest and pull the thing out to attach the new great scene. But those are the kind of scenes where you also understand why they would do what they do for him. why they love him, why they're loyal to him, why Rhodey would put up with everything, even though he, is really the most abusive friend ever, because they see the real Tony and they see that value there. And they obviously would hope someday that this Tony would be there for doing more good than he does. But they know he's in there. So
do you think that this film, encapsulates the relationship of Rhodey and Tony in a way? Because honestly, their friendship jumps to me insanely high at the beginning of Iron Man 2, where they're just absolute best friends and they're inseparable. Where this movie, I don't think they really liked each other until possibly right before the ending, and then I think at the end when he reveals himself, I think you look at Rhodey and he's just mad. I think he just throws his paper and he's just kind of he's pissed. I don't know. I feel like this movie didn't really do the best groundwork of the friendship between them. Yeah, I agree that it they have a weird friendship that does get a little bit better as the film goes along, but I just don't really, at the end of the movie, I'm just I don't know why I still don't know why he's friends with them. It may be better now, but it is so
I can see that, because you don't see necessarily why, but I think there was a moment for me that distilled that Rhodey loves Tony, and it's when he finds him, and he's the joke, he's going to the Fun Bee, but when he finds him, and I always thought Terrence Howard was the weak spot of this movie. I don't feel that way anymore. He's not.
Don't think so
I don't like him as much. I don't like him as much as I like Don Cheadle. I'll say that. I think Don Cheadle just does more with it, maybe because he had the chance to do more with it. But
I agree. Yeah,
that moment when he finds him in the desert and grabs him and hugs him and is come with me in the next time. Yeah, it's powerful, great acting, and you can see. I don't know why he loves him, but you see that he loves him.
Yeah,
he honestly loves him.
You know what?
That's someone he cares for. In that moment, it just really caught me, especially watching it this most recent time.
I like that. I'd never really thought about that. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I know I'm probably in the minority on this, but I kind of like Terrence Howard more as Rhodey than Don Cheadle.
Really?
I thought Iron Man 2 was a little kind of rough.
I just like Don Cheadle. I
love Don Cheadle.
Oh, no, Don Cheadle's a great actor, and he does a great job with the part. But I always preferred that witty banter between Terrence Howard and Robert Downey Jr. I always really liked that because I felt like in Iron Man 2, and then Iron Man 2 was kind of rough as a movie together.
I think
Rhodey was still trying to find his footing.
Well, I will say this. I don't think Rhodey had the opportunity in Iron Man 2 because again, here's we'll definitely talk about Iron Man 2 way later in the future, but you have to understand this movie, all the real conflict is really at the beginning, all the hard stuff. It's now everything here is Tony redoing his life, and a lot of us who grow and basically become a little bit different of a person, you cut people out of your life, and it's just him cutting out Obadiah, who's a big piece of shit. But but in Iron Man 2, it's the kind of demon in the bottle. You have Tony has alcoholism or poison. He's poisoned, so he's dying. And he's very grim in the film. And then you have Whiplash, somebody from his past, and somebody who's an actual way bigger threat than Obadiah was. And the Avengers hasn't even happened yet. Iron Man 2 has so much more conflict, and especially internal conflict, especially compared to the first Iron Man, because he has clarity. He gets out of the cave, and when he's with Rhodey the entire time, it's all clarity, and he's driven, and he's like, I'm changing the world, and then nothing's going to stop me. And then Obadiah's at home, and even then doesn't even do that much damage, compared to, what terrorists do. Yes, he potentially could have done a lot of damage, but he didn't do a lot. Where in Iron Man 2, there's a crap ton of destruction. There's an internal destruction, and, and I think just kind of counterpoint on you, I don't think they had the opportunity to have Rhodey be jokey and buddy with Stark because he was just so broken and dying. I don't know, and so and then Iron Man 3 just fucked everything, just messed everything up.
But I mean, honestly, Don Cheadle owned the role and he got a lot better.
Yeah,
it's in Civil War, Endgame, all of it, he just got way better. But I just remember specifically when I saw Iron Man 2, when I saw Don Cheadle, I was like, oh, there's something lost there. I missed Terrence Howard. I missed that witty banter between the two of them.
Absolutely. No, I definitely understand. Yeah. But But yeah, and so like you really like Terrence Howard. I mean, how did you feel about I guess his persona just being going in the movie, being in the movie theater, and not very knowledgeable about this stuff? I mean, like, do you think you understood every single character right after the cave until the movie kept progressing?
Yeah, I got everything as soon as I would say what really drew me in, what the turning point in that movie was probably when the ensign said, "Earn this," and then it got me.
Yeah,
I remember that, and I get chills right now. I just got chills of talking about it. But as soon as Ensign said that, and he looked at Tony Stark, and said, "Earn this," I was like, "I'm in." Like, I love this character. I want to see any kind of journey that he goes on in the future. I want to see it. I'm hooked. I love this movie. I loved it so much. I took my dad to watch it, and my dad hates all movies. He's like not a movie going person, and he loved it. He
that's
really
awesome.
enjoyed it. Yeah, and so I think that's how strong Iron Man is that you could pretty much take anybody to see it. It has that like Star Wars quality to it, where everybody
I can
enjoy
understand that, and I can absolutely agree to that. It has something for everybody.
Exactly.
It's a war movie. It's a sci-fi movie. It's a a little bit of a drama. It's there's so much into this film. It's comedic. It's a buddy film. Yeah, there's a lot to it. I don't know. How do you feel, Josiah, about all that?
Yeah, I'll say this because we've established early on. I read Iron Man here and there. I probably read more Iron Man than I am kind of remembering because I read a lot of comics, and I was more of a Marvel kid because I always felt that Marvel, like the movies, the comics, were kind of more connected. And it's kind of funny because DC, what to me they always did right was just telling good stories on their own. And although they have some really good crossover, like the Crises and whatnot, but Identity Crisis, one of my favorite stories ever. But in terms of Marvel, I just like not necessarily their crossovers, but the regular books were so interconnected that you would inevitably read Iron Man because Spider-Man was showing up or something like that or whatever it is. And Tony Stark would show up in S.H.I.E.L.D., the Nick Fury comic book, as Tony Stark because he was the weapons manufacturer and those kind of things. So you had these levels weaving it together. So I would read it, but I would say the definitive version of Spider-Man, for example, as good as a movie might be, he exists in my head from having read those comics. The definitive version of Iron Man is in this movie. The definitive versions of these characters all essentially come from this movie. That's the definitive Pepper Potts. I don't, Gwyneth Paltrow, whatever. She is Pepper Potts for me now. Like, that's it. Maybe Shakespeare in Love or something. Sure, give her an Oscar for that. But Pepper Potts, she became a definitive Pepper Potts because she did more than some of what I remember in the comics. And you see throughout the movie.
In the comics, Pepper Potts is an older lady. She's not even young.
She marries Happy.
Yeah.
For crying out loud. Ended up married with Happy. Yeah.
That's so bizarre.
So yeah, I mean that was definitely a big change, especially for me, for just a little that I knew about Pepper Potts. I was like, okay, she's young and very good looking. And so and I don't know, I feel like their chemistry works. It's weird. I never thought that Gwyneth
does. I think it totally does. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a weird thing about this film. I think all the chemistry works. Like I said, I still think that Rhodey and Tony Stark are very, very, very abusive. It's a very abusive friendship, but I think the chemistry between Terrence Howard and Robert Downey, like everybody in this film, was like perfect. It was like the opposite of watching the first like Spider-Man, like the first two Spider-Man, like where I don't think that Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst have any chemistry whatsoever, and I don't think James Franco has any chemistry with anybody besides Seth Rogen. And like,
my friend Josh, who was an actor at the time, he was actually an extra in the very first Spider-Man, by the way, in the wrestling sequence. There's a shot where if you pause it, you can see the back of his head. But Josh would always hate, and I would like James Franco because I would always talk about Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah.
But of course it's Seth Rogen, and he's like, James Franco, and I don't know if he probably changed his mind now. He would at least have some good things to say, but at that time, he just hated James Franco. Just would like, it's so frustrating with James Franco, and like especially in the Spider-Man movies, because he's like, come on, you're supposed to be the person that's going to become a Green Goblin. Come on, James Franco. He would get so frustrated.
He's so bad in
But
those films.
to your point, the chemistry, having not seen those recently, definitely not the chemistry you have here for sure.
Yeah.
Like and I think it's Robert Downey Jr. That's just him. Like he draws that out in people. He has an effortless nature to him as a person that he's similar enough to this character that he can just tap into that. And he's a great performer. Look at things like Chaplin and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which is kind of like more segueing into this kind of character. But yeah, I mean, he got nominated for an Oscar for Chaplin, I believe, right?
Yep.
I think so. But
he won, didn't he win?
Yeah. No.
Oh, he didn't win. Oh,
he did not. I just know he didn't win an Oscar.
I think he deserves it because I love that film.
It's one of those things where I'd have to like look who he didn't win, or who did. You know what I mean? Who, or at least who?
I think it was I think it was Al Pacino.
Take it away from him.
Oh, Al Pacino, Son of a Woman. Al Pacino, Son of a Woman.
Oh, really?
I think that year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll say this: that's also the year. Now I know it's that Clint Eastwood was nominated for Unforgiven, and I think that's Clint Eastwood's best single performance. So my money is actually on Clint Eastwood to take either of those out. But that's not the point. The point is Robert Downey Jr. is really good.
He's a people person. You know, he's
and we talked about it earlier. He was just the perfect casting, but as an actor, he can just make people comfortable. I think you see that in interviews with him too, for the most part, where he just makes other people comfortable and can do good things in interviews.
Yeah.
Distracted by Paul weaving.
And you know, so like with this film, I mean, now that we are revisiting this thing, like it's weird. It's like not even like watching a movie. It's like watching an experience. They're like watching a birth, but way more fun.
I don't know either of you. I've seen two births.
I've never seen a birth. I don't know if I want to, but like, I mean, but you know what I'm saying though. Like,
my daughter, who is 6 months old, that her birth was the most traumatic thing of my life.
It's like watching a birth in a cartoon where the stork is just leaving it at your doorstep.
That is a good analogy. It's like the beginning of Dumbo.
I mean, with you guys, I mean, like
blood splatter on the wall.
What are some of your favorite things about this film? Technically, story wise, just scenes, anything. Like what do you think is just makes this movie? Why this movie is so strong and so impactful?
From a visual effects point of view, one thing watching it again, and I watched some behind the scenes and how they did things, because we talked a little bit about Green Lantern with the suit, and Marvel's gone very much towards mocap suits because they have the technology. They can make it look good, so you just have the actors just standing there in their polka dots, basically, and they're doing mocap, and it's added on later for, you know, the Spider-Mans and Iron Mans of the world. Whereas this, they had real suits built, and I know like there were scenes where Robert Downey Jr. would wear the top end just to get in that character and feel it. So there's a combination of that, but there's also still a lot of the use of the visual effects that make it really good.
Yeah.
The visual effects just soar in this movie. The scene where the first scene where he's really Iron Man after he goes to the village and he does all that, and the suit starts to get dinged up.
Yes.
And it gets all the grime on it, and he goes and fights the planes. That's where it really kind of came alive and felt really real to me. Like, the movie was good at that point, but that's like, oh, I'm now watching. This is an Iron Man movie where he's being Iron Man. He's now Iron Man from here on out. And in the paint chipping on the suit and that kind of thing, where I really loved it. And especially because, like, one of the things that's bothered me a little bit, I understand why, is every mask now in Marvel is a nanotech mask where they can flip it off so that the actor can emote. And I love those moments because it's really cool when, you know, in Endgame, when you see Chadwick Boseman giving the look to Cap and not just like his mask nodding. I understand. But at the same time, every single character is like flip, you know, so it's kind of cool to see before that.
Where it comes out first and then up and then back. Yeah.
So it's just it helped ground it a little bit more. And I think it also kind of says, because it wouldn't, if we started in that place with every head as a nanotech head, it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
And that's kind of almost digressing, but I think
him figuring out nanotechnology in 2008 would be like come on.
Yeah, certainly. But it just, I think what it is we've established how grounded it is in character, but then when you nail the world of it so that it's exciting and extravagant, but realistic. And that's what this movie in The Dark Knight that year really excelled at, is a big, extravagant, exciting movie that has more depth going on in both of them, but yet is also grounded in reality in a way, and at least as real as these can be grounded in reality.
Yeah.
And those little things like paint chipping on the Iron Man armor makes it that much more real. Like, and you can then start to accept it.
In these dents and everything. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
like
amazing.
You can feel the weight to things, like when he lands and stuff.
Yeah, I want to bounce off like what you were saying about The Dark Knight and kind of go back to what we were saying way before, was that how much we understand this character and how much character development, where as much as I want to give Christopher Nolan praise, I still think he fails miserably with certain aspects of Batman. Yes, I love The Dark Knight. I think it's absolutely one of my favorite superhero films of all time. Batman Begins is my favorite Batman movie, but he fails so poorly at he does a really piss poor job as to what is one of Batman's number one characteristics and what he's known for, which is being the great detective. The detective skills are laughable in The Dark Knight, where it came out in the same year.
The thing where he shoots the bullet, and
where he
for some
shoots
reason
the bullets for
reverse engineers a fingerprint.
Yeah,
I like though. At least they tried to have him be a detective.
I mean, it was that, and then him having the video feed, vision of where they were hacking into webcams. I was like, just look around. Like, you don't need, like, if anything, that's making it worse for you, man. Where this film, we just understand everything, and honestly, barely any words. Like, we can understand his cynicism from his body posture. Like, if this was a silent movie, I still would be happy and understand Tony Stark fully. Where we had 3 Dark Knight films, and we still didn't understand really what they were going for with Batman, besides, oh, he's big and scary, and then he gave up. Like, that was like, not to knock on those films too much, because again, there are staples, not the third one, but they're staples, where this movie is just so standalone, and it creates a character and like so well, and so you see yourself in him, and you also just understand him, and I just wanted to say that, like, and kind of like add on to what you were saying about, The Dark Knight coming out that year and the similarities, and also maybe some things that are not. So, anyway,
real quick, I didn't even look up the guy's name, but there is a random Air Force guy in that scene where Rhodey is like, he's on the cell phone with Rhodey, which is great, by the way, where he's like, it's me, like, it's me. He's like, it's me, it's not, I'm inside of it. There's a random Air Force guy, one of the guys in that scene, because it's cutting around very quickly at all these different characters. He's the guy who blackmails Bruce Wayne in The Dark Knight. That random guy. So it's just kind of funny. I didn't even
realize that.
I didn't notice it. I didn't even look at it, but it's the same actor that plays the guy, that Bruce then drives, that saves him in the car, and he had a good
year, and I don't think he's done anything else.
I can't tell you that I've seen him in anything. So okay,
I will say this. Now I'm sad that we didn't see him in Far From Home.
Oh,
okay.
Well,
he was not. I mean, he was not one of the Tony Stark guys. He was one of the Navy guys.
That's true.
Air Force guy, rather.
That's true.
Oh, one thing I wanted to point out in that Gomera scene, what I really like is when he does come back there, he totally punched a terrorist into a wall and killed him, and then he
I know, I wrote that down. I wrote down Tony Stark. Iron Man just killed that guy.
I love how brutal he is,
Yeah.
Because he's just lashing out, and I love
he's killing terrorists, and that's almost all of them died. Almost all of them, especially the guy at the end. Those people ripped that guy
through the wall, through a concrete wall.
No.
That scene was I was surprised watching it again how brutal that scene was. Really, I mean, I made the joke, he killed a guy, but I was surprised it was really brutal. He is angry and intense.
If I remember correctly, from what we watched, no, Iron Man, all 3 films is going for death. He's not sending people away. He's not. I mean, Captain America as well. That's the whole thing with the MCU. Almost everybody, I would say minus Thor and the Guardians, are not going in, like with Guardians want bounties, but like Thor's the only one that actually captures somebody. Everybody else kills everybody else. There's so much death.
I think the difference between this movie and then in later installments is that these people they don't have like Ivan Vanko's whips or anything like that. They don't have any kind of weaponry other than the guns. They're just regular people. And so when he's like being brutal to just like these regular people, it's like more alarming.
Yeah.
Because they have like really no means to defend themselves at all.
Yeah.
And but it's the thing. What I love about it is that you probably would do the same thing.
Yeah,
I know I would. If I was in his shoes, I totally would react the same way. Where I'd like punch guys through walls and repulse them in the face. Shoot like a missile at them, and
I didn't see it. I never saw any of his actions as as him getting payback. I saw it as basically him waking up and being like, no, I'm part of this war, and I'm gonna fight, and I'm gonna fight for what's right. I'm gonna fight for innocent people. Like I feel like it's actually more of just a call to arms than it is than him taking it. It's what's the word I'm trying to think of? Him getting revenge. But and also like to go off with the killing. Remember, he had a gun and was going to shoot Mandarin in the head in Iron Man 3. He infiltrated the house, had a gun, put it to his head, and was going to just shoot him with a gun. Like, I think Iron Man has always been, you're gonna die if you're bad. Anyways, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, just yeah, I think it's pretty neat that he does that, and I think part of it, I would say 90%.
It's pretty neat that he's a murderer. That's pretty neat. It's like, I just like you said it. That's pretty neat that he's a murderer. That's pretty neat.
We're choice of words.
Kill them all.
I think 90% is like, hey, he wants to do something. He wants to change the fate of that village. Then 10%, I think, is just revenge.
Really?
For the death of Jensen, I think 10%. So 90% just. I need to end this.
Yes, that's right. He does say that. Village, right? He does say it for that one guy, right? He's like, "This is for Jensen."
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. I should have taken notes. But yeah. I mean, Josiah. I mean, with this film, I mean, like with everything, like from a writing standpoint. I mean, is there anything that you would like? I mean, yeah, this was heavy improv on RDJ, or from his, side of it. I mean, how do you feel about this as a storytelling?
I think it's one of those things where it's every time I hear the things about the turmoil maybe of writing it and how it was on the fly, it was good on the fly writing. The writers were still writing it as it was ongoing. They didn't know exactly who the villain was going to be. There's they were toying with different villains. The Mandarin was really going to be in it at one point. The 10 Rings thing, the Mandarin, and then they said, oh no, that doesn't work. So like as they were shooting, they were still thinking of that. Obadiah Stane was obviously built to be a villain, but maybe not necessarily in the way he was executed. So I'm just, every time I watch it, I'm impressed by that. It's like this, when you tell me that, it's like it shouldn't work. But again, from what I understand is that they did have those story beats laid out in terms of like the main points of action, kind of the crux of how it's going to go. Maybe they didn't know which bad guy it would be. There was one point where they literally it was going to be the Crimson Dynamo instead of the Ironmonger. So, and they were designing stuff.
But like, isn't the Crimson Dynamo? Isn't Whiplash like a villain called Whiplash and Crimson Dynamo smashed together or something? Iron Man 2?
Yeah. Like, well, the Whiplash in Iron Man 2, I think it's kind of Crimson Dynamo-esque, mainly because they wanted Mickey Rourke, and Mickey Rourke was weird and wanted to do an accent. Yeah. So they made him I think they just kind of went with like those things, and those are the kind of things that get a little distracting.
And he does not have good things to say about Marvel.
and that's Mickey Rourke coming off of The Wrestler. And it's like he was brilliant in that film and just amazing. And they're like, do whatever you want, Mickey, you're back. And it's like, oh, that was a bad idea. Like it's, oh, you want a parrot?
I want my bird. I want my bird.
That was a Mickey Rourke request. Like, So Iron Man 2, I would have to watch it again, but I think it's like an example. From what I understand, it kind of was similarly put together, where it wasn't as developed as certainly later Marvel
you can
movies would be
definitely
when they
tell.
went into
Yeah.
production. And with this one, though, everything just worked, and Favreau just knew what he wanted to do in terms of overall story. So that's like we can just fill it in, right? We know this
Yeah.
is. I think they knew the character arcs and those kind of things. They knew the outline of where they were going to take it. That then they could write on the fly and change things and improvise things within that structure.
Absolutely.
You know, like okay, it's going to climax in this way. They're going to be emotionally, it's going to go this way, and these kind of things we can just figure out exactly how to get there, but we know that's where we're going to go.
Yeah.
And I think they knew that stuff from the beginning, and that's why it then worked when they were doing it on the fly.
Yeah.
Because again, every time I hear it, I'm just so impressed that because it just works. It's like how this should have been a disaster in terms of coming together as a story, but it totally came together as a story.
They had really good editors.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I even noticed this time watching again is how Obadiah Stane, a man whose first name is after my own heart, they very subtly sort of like play him up more and more as a bad guy.
Yeah.
And it's a nice way to do it because you don't smack it home at the beginning of the movie, but very slowly there's little hints, and then there's a certain point like slightly past once he becomes Iron Man, then it's established that he's the villain, and there's that moment where at the party when he's like, I pushed you out of the board, Tony, and you're like, okay, that's the bad guy. You get it then, but there was like subtler hints.
Yeah.
And even at that point, you don't know exactly what his villainy kind of is projected out to be.
And that was actually going to be the last thing I wanted to talk about on the will be the next question. So I guess I think we should dive into it. I mean, I think we have so many good things to say, and I don't want this episode to be as long as Green Lantern's episode. And so I think for the last question,
which we're still recording, we're still talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somewhere out in
space. No. I mean, I think I can talk about that movie for 36 hours. But so yeah, for the last question of the night, this movie is a staple. We love this film. We absolutely love this film. We have Obadiah Stane as a villain, and for the longest time, Marvel did not have a good villain minus Loki. They had a really, really, really rough time creating good villains and giving them screen time and also, really just developing them. So how do you guys feel about Obadiah Stane being the first villain of the MCU and in this film? Do you think like Jeff Bridges' performance, the character themselves, what he turns into and the fate of him? What do you guys think?
I thought, it's funny. So I was watching it last night, and Judy was taking care of the kids. So she's normally watches these movies with me, and she got to watch all of Green Lantern, but only like the last 20 minutes of Iron Man. So poor Judy. But she at one point she's like, "Wait, is that Josh Brolin?" And I'm like, "What? No, that's Jeff Bridges." She's like, "Oh, that's right." But when she said that, something clicked, and I'm like, "Oh, he kind of gets at the end." He's like a proto Thanos here, kind of the way he behaves and his intensity and stuff, where it's this like
where he thinks he's right,
it's this calculated sort of villain. Yeah, I was like, oh, it's kind of like interesting that the who became the big bad. You have sort of the characterization is similar in this very first film. So obviously the execution is very different character. But there's some like line of similarity that Judy just saw because she was kind of half paying attention to something in the performance, and she just thought like for a second she's like, "Whoa, that like, what's going on here?" And quickly about Obadiah Stane. So in the comic book, he's a business rival. And so actually on my YouTube channel, Josiah is Right, WRITE, I did a video about the Ironmonger storyline. So I broke down like the volume graphic novel collecting it, and it's very hit or miss. It's like up and down in the story, but Obadiah Stane in the comic is really just like kind of like a Lex Luthor going against Iron Man. He's just a bald, maniacal superhero villain that's very troubled. Like, he murdered his father for the fun, like weird stuff, like very, you make sure he's a bad guy, like without a doubt. But I felt like it's by Jeff Bridges, without really space to develop a character, develops a character.
Yeah. Because
he's so good. And I think that's what, if you just look at the movie, there's not a lot of character development for Obadiah Stane.
No.
At all. It's because
I think that the best character development for that movie, for Obadiah was him in the office with Pepper when Pepper is infiltrating and getting those files. Like, how he is just like you get a sense of who he is really. Like she's Pepper. She's just Pepper. So she's not a threat. So you get to see how he is in real life, which is really fucking creepy.
Yeah, like menacing in a way that's like very real world kind of menacing kind of thing. Not like not typical supervillain menacing, which is different. Obviously, he really encapsulates just that scariness at that moment. Like that's one of the best scenes. And again, it's funny because like I'm watching that scene, I'm like, oh great, she has to download the information on the hard drive, blah blah blah. It's like a super cliche scene, but because the acting is so good, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Because I hate those kind of scenes in movies because it's like I have to get this downloaded. I gotta quick, and then it says download complete on your computer. What computer says that when you're download complete? But it's so Stain is so good when she leaves and he immediately knows that look, he's so mad, and she knows she has to get out of there in that great moment where Coulson was scheduled for that meeting and he shows up.
Yes.
And she's like, just keep walking.
Yeah,
she's like, you remember our meeting? Yep, right now. It's like that great because the characters that like those little things that might be cliched that it's elevated by performance and filmmaking and editing so that maybe what is a bit of a cliche just can be like, rad.
Yeah, like the perfect timing in film, things that happen.
Yeah.
It was like, I hope that doesn't happen. Blam! It happens. And like, like, I hope I don't see a black cat, and then turn the corner, black cat, and you're just like, oh, okay, timing. What about you, Paul?
I really like that scene when Tony's getting a call from Pepper, and then all of a sudden he like freezes, and Obadiah's there with that weird little ear thingy.
Yeah.
And the camera does like this Dutch angle, and like Obadiah's like staring right into him, and he's like, "Oh, there's you're the golden goose, and this is your best egg." And then he gets this device that I think he made. It's an arc extractor or whatever. I think he just made it for that.
Yeah.
That he pulls his arc out.
I think those exist. I think they're just for.
Yeah,
I think they're just a type of not tongs, but they're a type of grappler for like
really?
For machinery. I assume. I mean, I also, they have engineers and they have a bunch of stuff that he definitely could have been like, hey, I need you to do this project for me.
Put that together.
Yeah, I need you to make this. Here are the dimensions.
Yeah, but I love how like he gets that close to Tony and is able to like really mess with him, like take his arc out, and then you have a great moment when he's down in the workshop, and Dummy drops some of the proof that Tony Stark has a heart.
Yeah.
That arc reactor, and he kind of saves him. And it's such a great character moment for like a piece of machinery. You know?
I know. Again, that damn arm is like one of the best MCU characters. It's so pure and it's so sad.
I heard that the Dummy is getting a Disney Plus series. That's good news.
I would watch the shit out of it. It's just dropping things or like about to like have the fire extinguisher go off and just be yelled at. Like, I'd be down
at inappropriate times.
Oh yeah, Tony Stark's funeral.
I'll say this. Like I've shared this with you guys before because of where I'm living. I'm recording in a garage, and it just occurred to me this is the perfect movie to be recording in a garage.
Or in a cave.
I'm not next to like a Porsche and a Camaro or whatever Tony's cars. It's like like a Lexus sedan.
I will say. Sorry, I want to say one thing about the arm. Now looking at it, I'm actually very sad that it was not at Tony Stark's funeral. I'm just saying that straight up. The little kid from Iron Man 3 was, but the arm wasn't. No. Sorry. Justice for the arm.
Hilarious. It's just like,
but did he blow it up at the end of Iron Man 3?
No, I thought it survived. Or I think I don't know.
No, he brought it out of the ocean.
Yeah,
it was in his truck.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it's still around.
Right. You're right.
Yeah. No, it makes an appearance again in Homecoming.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's holding something happy like that thing's worth more than what you're worth or something like that. And he goes, Choo. Anyways, Paul, what were you saying?
I think the funny thing is how that battle between Ironmonger and Iron Man, how quaint it is. Like it's just on a freeway. They fly up. Ironmonger ices up.
Yeah.
And then they're on the roof of like Stark Industries. Like how quaint all of that is.
Yeah, it's
It's
contained.
like later on with more movies, it's like an epic space battle with like thousands of people.
A city
and, like,
falling. Yeah.
Yeah, city falling out of the sky.
There's still a sky beam, though. There's still a sky beam in this scene. There's still a sky beam.
Oh yeah. They just have to throw that in there. Just, but
this is the first sky beam in Marvel. So hey, come on.
And so, and one thing I wanted to point out, one of the guy that Jeff Bridges yells at is Peter Billington, and that's Ralphie from A Christmas Story.
Yeah.
And he's actually really good friends with Jon Favreau, I think.
Oh, that's awesome. But he's also comes back in Homecoming or in Far From Home.
In Far From Home,
yeah.
But yeah. He yells at Ralphie. Tony Stark built this in a cave with his bare hands or something like that. God. I'm sorry, I'm not Tony Stark.
One thing I noticed is right at the beginning of the movie when Tony first gets captured, you kind of hear Pepper say, "Tony!" And then the same thing happens too when he's up on the roof and he's about to die, or the screen fades to black. You say Tony. Yeah, I like how it kind of bookends.
I didn't even. Wow. Okay, now I got it. What? Okay. But how do you feel about Ironmonger? How do you feel about the progression? Do you think Jeff Bridges got the chance? Do you think he did well? Like, what do you think about the first MCU villain?
He did great with just not enough to do with, though. I wanted more from him. There was he said in interviews that there was a version where like at the end kind of thing where you'd open it up and he wouldn't be in the suit so that he could potentially come back for more movies. I wish that could have happened because I felt like he didn't get enough. He didn't get enough of. He's just such a great actor that he doesn't need much to make it work, and there's so much good going on that you kind of don't care. You don't always need, as long as like the world works and the other characters are working and that actor is good enough to bring it together in that role that's kind of minimized. In this case, the villain, because something's got to go somewhere at some point to keep a movie from being 7 hours long. And I think that was where it was, unfortunately, because and at the same time he's so good that I want to see him given more to do with that character, to make that character not just that kind of scary, intimidating guy that pretended to be Tony's loyal friend, but like who he really is, which we don't get to see, unfortunately. And I'll say this one thing, like talking about the end battle, that's the one kind of thing in the movie that kind of now I find just a little bit boring, because it's just like a superhero punch fight. But I loved that the way Tony essentially wins. I mean, there's more that happens after this, but when they go up into the air and he's like, well, how did you stop the icing problem? And it's Tony essentially winning with some kind of knowledge. And I like that moment. But because it's funny, this and the Hulk both came out, within a month of each other, and they both essentially had the same ending where they smash each other around. One is in New York City and one's in LA for the last little hunk of the movie. And that was, I feel like they could have made it a little bit more personal somehow. That's kind of my one gripe with this movie, especially because like Stain was his father figure for a long time when his father passed away and they ran the company together. And I think they still don't know, or they didn't know how to tackle it, because the fact that didn't come up in Iron Man 2 or 3, I get you can't tackle that in Avengers or something, but there's so much left on the table in terms of the relationship.
And to be honest, you actually said everything I wanted to say. They didn't tackle, like, the one thing that they didn't tackle was the fact is that Obadiah, no matter what, even with all the revelations of what he did to Tony, it still should have affected him so much. I feel like he should have been a little bit more paralyzed. I think he should have taken a little bit more hits in the fight because of him just not wanting to fight his dad, like it's like Yondu, like he's not the father, but he's his dad, he's
and honestly, like, this is in this movie, you get the sense that this is who he wished his father was. His real father was the Taskmaster and the not the Marvel character Taskmaster, but the one cracking the whip, and then Obadiah would be the one that would come over and put his arm around Tony, and that's the sense you get from their relationship.
Yeah.
And you wish that change would have devastated him more. And I think, because I don't mind necessarily that it's superheroes, big iron suits punching each other, because it's entertaining.
Yeah.
But I wish that there was more of their sort of character history at play. Like you said, that would have been a great way to do it, whereas Tony is having trouble fighting.
Like, I don't want to fight you. Why
reason.
are you doing this? Like, yeah. And just, anything. I don't know. How do you feel, Paul?
Actually, I disagree with both
That's
of you,
fine.
Actually. I think Obadiah, I think he had like a great rapport with Tony, and I kind of got that whole like father figure aspect of him. And
but that's what we're saying, Paul. We're not saying that wasn't there. We're just saying that we didn't feel they played on that in the climax. Because that's what you understand?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I guess they didn't really play that in the climax, but I just think the fact that, like, I like how he's sort of a corrupted version of his father's legacy.
Yes.
I think that whole concept is that whole metaphor of him being that is interesting to me. And there's so much about this movie that works
he's
so well.
He's a stain on the company.
It's what was that?
He's a stain on the company.
Ah.
Yeah.
He's a
stain on the legacy.
Stain.
And the thing is, like, it is the first.
Oh my god!
MCU
If he had stopped, oh my god! In the middle of a fight where he's like his foot's on Tony, and you just like, now you're gonna know what it's like to be a stain.
I'm sure they tried that. I'm sure they did.
Just
knowing this movie, they're like, eh.
It's like the butthole cut for Cats. We'll just never see it.
Oh jeez.
Hopefully not.
I don't know. I've never seen Cats, but I definitely want to see that butthole cut.
If you're gonna see Cat, that's the why not?
That's how I feel. Go big or go home, man.
I had a cat. I love my cat. You see your cat's butt a lot.
Yeah, they love showing you their butt.
I have my dog, Paul. You guys have both seen my dog. He has a curly tail that goes up. You see my dog's asshole a lot.
Yeah, but cats love showing it though. They love presenting, and that's that's just.
They'll look back at you and wink and stuff. They'll really make it known. But I don't know. The thing is, for me, it's like this is the first MCU movie, and the fact that it works so well, I'm willing to forgive.
Oh yeah.
Not being
and I feel the same way. Like I'm saying that with like I'm like, it's almost like I had to look for something to nitpick in this movie. Yeah. Really, truly.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, but I just like the thing that is kind of comical to me is when he rips out his target computer, and Tony's like right in front of him, and he can't shoot him for shit. He's like right there, and he's not able to shoot at him. It's like so bizarre to me. That's like the only thing I think that kind of takes me out of that final battle.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what Tyler and I were probably. He was intentionally missing because he couldn't shoot him.
Yeah. But it definitely did not convey that at all.
No, not at all.
I mean, Josiah pretty much took every word actually out of my mouth. So, I mean, I wish it really did. I think he is a good first villain. I think he is actually. I still think he's actually one of the best MCU villains. Honestly,
he really is. He really is.
I think with Killmonger, him, I still don't consider Loki a villain. I just think he's just a misunderstood, whatever. But like, I mean,
and if he was a villain, he's not anymore.
Yeah, I mean, after this film, we had Whiplash, Red Skull. God, Red Skull was so bad. I mean, honestly, I like Red Skull way more in Infinity War and in Endgame than I did in all of Captain America: First Avenger. So sad.
Yeah, same here.
So sad. And then
that was a huge miss.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Honestly, and like going back to the MCU, I actually still really like not Abomination, but like I actually really really liked what's his name? Shit. And I'm forgetting the actor's name too. He's like one of my favorite actors, and I cannot believe
Tim Roth.
I
can't think of the character's name.
I think people,
but I know, who becomes Abomination. But I agree. Actually, he was the best thing in that movie.
I actually really liked his performance, and I actually
And especially the scenes he has with William Hurt.
Yeah,
those are really good.
He's just a soldier. Like he speaks like a soldier. He's respectful as a soldier, but driven. His progression actually made sense. Where Obadiah, I think, kind of like went whoop. Like, okay, you went to like murder and like kidnapping a little too too fast. Like, I mean, and going. I feel like his progression again. Like, I think the movie could have been 10 minutes longer, and a little bit of Obadiah in it. But that's just me.
I think so. Yeah. Like I said, the 7. I referenced the 7-hour cut, but 10. Yeah. Give Obadiah one more good scene, and I think that would have made this maybe like a perfect comic book movie. Because I think this might be the best origin comic book film ever, without a doubt. Like I'm on the fence because Batman Begins is really awesome as an origin film, and these two are very kind of similar and different, but they're both really solid origin films.
See, I think Guardians is still mine.
I'm going to throw a monkey wrench in both of your arguments and say the best origin story is Batman: Mask of the Phantasm.
But that's not an origin, is it?
Yeah.
Where?
Bruce Wayne becoming Batman.
Wait, I thought I need to rewatch Mask of the Phantasm. Then I thought Joker was like very.
Well, I'm just trying to reference movies people have seen. That's the difference.
Oh. There you go. That's my. No, but honestly, it's up there. It
is up there. I would say so.
So
I'm also, but live action.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
Live action. Yeah, it's probably the best.
Yeah, I actually lied. I completely forgot. So the last question of the night is going to be, what was it like hearing Robert Downey Jr. say, "I am Iron Man," revisiting that and seeing it again after Endgame, after everything? What when we just watched this, because I just watched this, you guys just watched this. Feelings. Go ahead.
Well, I'll say first of all, again, knowing how this movie was made, that was an improv line by Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
They were just kind of trying it, and it just makes the movie. It makes the movie. It sets everything up, because then if Tony Stark is Iron Man, he is going to relish in being Iron Man. Like, that's what he's going to do. He's going to celebrate it. Right before that, there's a little joke about referencing the comic books, how they pretend that Iron Man is actually Tony's bodyguard.
Yeah.
And that's the cover story that they actually used in the comics. So they kind of then Coulson's like, this isn't my first rodeo kind of thing. But just thinking about that just blows my mind, because that also largely defined a lot of the tone for what would come in the Marvel Cinematic Universe too.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Paul?
I loved it, and just hearing that again made me all emotional.
Oh God!
Just hearing the connection to Endgame, and I remember
that guitar right after that, just
like. Well, no, it's not even that. It's just like for me, that 2 seconds he takes before he even says it, where he has the card up, not even looking at it, and he's just looking at a camera, and he just goes, "I am Iron Man." Like even just that 2 second build up, it's just like my whole body just like caves in. I'm just like ready for like this whole like all these emotions to be blown up, like excitement and then sadness and and anxiety and everything.
Like you said, and watching it in the context of every other movie now, it's like 2 moments that made me really emotional was that moment and the moment where 3 moments actually. There's that moment where he is, I am Iron Man, and it's like that, like all those, like the excitement, the tragedy all at once. The early on when he's hammering in the cave and becoming Iron Man, that moment really got me. Like I had chills. And then the other one is where I think it's with Pepper, and he says, "There is nothing except this."
Yeah.
Like he is this now. He is Iron Man now.
That's a great line.
That moment, that one really got to me in a way that it hadn't before, because now knowing through all of these movies, all the way with Infinity War and Endgame, how that's all there was for him, and that was his journey, the character journey. We saw this character essentially be born, and we saw this character then die. Yeah. Over the course of all these movies.
Yeah.
And watching this again, it's like, okay, he had a great entrance into the world, a great birth. Though very different
and,
than actual childbirth.
and both times
Speaking
saying
as a
it,
father.
and both times saying it were both improv lines,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Brilliant.
Oh, even in Endgame?
Yeah, Endgame it wasn't even supposed. I think he was just supposed to say "No, you're not" or something like that, and instead Robert Downey Jr. just said, "I am Iron Man." After he says, "I am inevitable," and he was supposed to say, "No, you're not." Snap, and then it's something along the lines of that. But I think he just Harrison Ford it, where he was like, "Nope."
So I have an
Not
embarrassing
doing
story.
your way. I got a better way.
I was at Target, and when they were doing the promotional stuff for the Blu-ray of Avengers Endgame, every once in a while they'd show that scene where Tony does the snap his Iron Man, and I would start tearing up.
Oh, 1,000%.
Like in the middle of Target, and people were like, "What's wrong with that guy? Like, is he okay?"
You should tell him Tony's dead. Tony's dead. That's what I would have done.
Well,
I mean, I love embarrassing myself at Target.
You know, we're getting off of the Iron Man, but I've talked about birth. So my daughter was born October 2nd of last year, and I remember I came back from the hospital, and I got my older daughter, who is now 3, who was at the time 2, down for a nap. So I got Penny down, and Judy was at the hospital. I was coming back and forth because my in-laws were staying at our place taking care of Penny. And I came back and I sent them away kind of thing. And I got Penny down for a nap and I showered and I was like, I'll watch a movie. So I watched Endgame. And watching that movie in like, because it's so many fathers with daughters in that movie. And as a father of daughters, like watching that and then thinking of this movie now, I was weeping watching the last like hour of that movie during the entire battle sequence. It's amazing that in everything that's there though, in that sequence, that climax, it begins here.
Yes,
it begins with this movie in this character, and it
begins with I am Iron Man. Honestly, I think it all begins with I am Iron Man, and that's just where it begins. And it's like now the world knows that there are superheroes, and they're proud, and they're there to protect, and all this other stuff. It's this whole frenzy. But I think that's going to be enough for Iron Man. Unless you guys have any last thoughts for the film.
You know, the post-credits sequence.
I mean,
how can we not talk about?
I should mention that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So have you guys seen it? I haven't seen it yet. No. So
you know what? It's patience is the best thing is the most important thing for a superhero.
I've always
nobody got that. That was
I was talking over you. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was saying it's because patience is the number one is the most important thing for a superhero.
Oh, that's the Homecoming, right? Or what? Yeah, okay. So what movie is that in, that joke? Because I thought that was hilarious. And there are people, I was in the theater with that one, they're like so mad. So I've always been one to stay for movies through the credits. And having, worked somewhat in the industry here and there and things like that, as a writer, I appreciate it. But I don't do it out of like respect for the people that make movies, even though I think that's a good thing to do because a lot of people make these movies.
Yes.
But I just do it because when I watch a movie, particularly in the theater, I want to be in the world of that movie so I can just process it there. I don't like to talk about movies at that moment. Like, I think Paul's been a couple movies with me, and he's probably known it. He'd be like, "What do you think of it?" I'm like, like I'm like very like, don't talk to me right now. Give me 3 more minutes of these credits.
Let me progress.
Kind of process things. I'm not done yet.
You let it simmer.
Yeah, and it's not about the post-credit sequence. So that's a great example where it's like me and my couple of friends that would see, and they knew that I would stay, so they would stay with me. And you were in LA though, so a lot of people in LA would stay because it's LA. People make movies. People appreciate the people that make movies. So a lot of people would stay where I saw it, but the audience was just so shocked when something came up at the end. Like I didn't know, I hadn't heard anything. Like then there's this scene at the end with Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury, which is insane because in the Ultimate Universe they intentionally made Sam look like
everybody was sitting around the table and they were like, "Who would you play? Who would play you?" And then he just put Sam Jackson, and everyone's like, "Anybody else?" Sam Jackson.
And that moment where he shows up and like in the Ultimates was really created in particular, like the Ultimate Universe and the Ultimates was a way to sort of make the Avengers work in a cinematic way. If you like, that was their intention with Mark Miller, and I forget who drew it, but that was their intention with that book. And watching that, I understand that Brian Michael Bendis actually wrote that scene. and he wrote like 3 pages of scene like dialogue for Nick Fury. And I think it's come out more recently where he talks about X-Men and like he references other things that then they couldn't even do because of the rights at the time, but then they kind of pulled it together for just that little snippet, but they wanted like a bunch to work with that they could edit it down to. And that was like another game-changing thing where you're like, oh, this is what we've wanted. This is leading to this connected thing where the Avengers come together.
Yeah.
And that was that first hint of that.
Yeah. I mean, it was powerful. It was cool to seeing it. I think I was only used to seeing post-credit scenes in animated films. So seeing it in a live-action film was actually really cool. Because like Pixar, DreamWorks, all of them, almost, most of them had, post-credit scenes. And so it was really cool seeing a live-action film to do it for the first time. So I was really excited. Plus, I've loved Samuel L. Jackson since Coming to America when he was robbing McDowell's. So, but yeah.
So when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, cool, Samuel L. Jackson," but I had no idea who Nick Fury was.
Oh, yeah.
I knew of the Avengers, but I had to like ask people about it. Like, what does that mean? That what is he talking about? And it's so funny just to like look back at that movie when I first saw it. How little I knew about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How just it was kind of not really a priority at the time. It was just kind of a movie I saw, and then as the time passed on, it became like such an important part of my life. And then that's a little bit melodramatic, but like every year at Comic-Con, like I started going to Comic-Con in 2008, and I've been every year since then. And the Marvel panel is always like the crown jewel of the Hall H Marvel panel is like the crown jewel of Comic-Con, and I kind of see like the Marvel Cinematic Universe as it grew as very kind of formative in my life. Like it really impacted me in so many different ways. And it's interesting just to see the genesis of that, where it's like, oh, this was a pretty cool movie that I like. And now it's like any Marvel movie, I just has so much credibility to it. And I like so much. Like, one thing that always bothers me is people kind of take it for granted in a way. Like, they'll focus on, oh, maybe the villains aren't good or whatever. But it's like, these movies work so well, and the more time you put into them, the more it pays off. Like, there's so many little things in this movie that pay off in Endgame. Like, the arc reactor with proof that Tony Stark has a heart, that shows up in Endgame. The Spider-Man with the gauntlet, like so many different things pay off, and it's just like it's interesting to see that journey from just this one movie that maybe will work to like this cinematic universe that everybody else is trying to copy their success. And it's interesting how the Marvel Cinematic Universe in many ways replaced Star Wars as like the cultural phenomenon. I kind of Star Wars was like in 2008, that was the thing. That was like a big deal. And last year you had Rise of Skywalker and you had Avengers Endgame. And Avengers Endgame was like easily the most satisfying movie of last year, if not the last 5 years. And it did something unprecedented where it like took 22 movies and like satisfactorily resolved them, and was a great movie in itself.
And then Rise of Skywalker did whatever Rise of Skywalker did.
Rise of Skywalker is just like a hot mess. And I really enjoyed watching with Josiah. Like, it was fun and seeing with Penny. And it was like a really good experience watching it with them. But the movie itself was like so broken.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to see like how much this small thing that at first really didn't mean much to me just really grew into like this like amazing thing. And so
and really just in one medium, where Star Wars had like books and comics and a TV special and a couple TV shows like Droids and stuff like that. I mean, it only had 6 movies and then a bunch of things that were just added, and regardless if it was canon or not. Where MCU, honestly, like, it was just movies, like the Netflix shows or whatever, but like it really was just consistent movies with like maybe 2 or 3 duds. Like for me, the only MCU movie I do not like is Thor 2. The rest of them, I like them. I think they're all 6 out of 10 and above. Every single one of them, which is so hard. And so there's not one of them where I'm just like, I don't want to watch that except for Thor 2. And that's an amazing achievement. Like what you're saying, like we're in Star Wars. It's kind of like, I don't like Return of the Jedi. I don't like episode 2 at all. And, episode 1 is kind of a chore to watch as well. So like when you have 6, especially at that time in 2008, when Star Wars is such a phenomenon, that's only like 3 movies I really want to watch that are Star Wars movies for me.
Yeah.
I think in part though, the phenomenon of Marvel is it's the characters, the fact that they extend so far too. That means something, that these are characters that have been around since the 60s and have this trove of stories in the comic book form. And there are other things that I think that makes it resonate even more in some way. Whereas Star Wars, it was just these movies, and there's been other things that have come since then, but it's the comic books and Marvel has been a part of our cultural landscape since the 60s.
Yeah, it's true.
But now it's like not a niche thing anymore. It's not like for comic book nerds. It's not for us, the 3 of us on this podcast. It's for my wife too, who likes and enjoys comic books, but she's not into it. I'll say this. I was thinking about this. It's for my daughter. We talked, Paul mentioned that with Penny, we saw Rise of Skywalker, which I think we talked about on the Green Lantern episode. And Penny knows who Iron Man is. She's 3 years old. She knows who Iron Man is. I was watching it the other day, or I think I was watching like some clips about it or something, not the movie. And she's like, "Is that Iron Man, Dad? Going to beat up some bad guys?" I'm like, "That's what he does, yeah." And she knows who Iron Man is. And she wouldn't, if you imagine if she were born in the mid 2000s, if she were 3 years old in 2006 or 7, she wouldn't know who Iron Man is.
Yeah.
But she being born now, and when she does, like the first character in the MCU that she knows is Iron Man.
That's crazy.
So it just tells you how the B character shifted to being an absolute A character, because when you get it right, and I think the fact that he's a B character, you have a little bit more leeway.
Yeah.
You're not as beholden. Like everybody has their opinion on what Spider-Man should be like, what Batman should be like. Whereas Iron Man, you have a little bit of flexibility, so you can go in a little bit of places. You can change things a bit and still understand that the character you want is essentially there in those comic books.
Yeah.
I think that's why the resonance is so much greater.
Absolutely. And, I don't want this to go on too long, but thank you guys so much for being here. So glad we got to enjoy Iron Man. And, we would love to hear everybody else's thoughts. So if you guys, want to tweet at us or anything like that, you guys are more than welcome to. Alrighty, where can they find your stuff, Josiah?
You can find me on Twitter and YouTube mainly. I'm frequently, pretty much weekly, with videos, including my Ironmonger video. So that one relates to this, where I broke down the Ironmonger storyline, the graphic novel. So check me out at Josiah is Right, Josieh. That's how you spell Josiah. The is part is, you can figure that out. And the right is Write, as in writer. So find me, Josiah is Right, and check out the Ironmonger video.
All right, Paul, what do you got going on?
Just Popmosis Film. And I have an Instagram, Arcade Blackfire with a Y.
Nice.
But that's about it. I don't have just this.
That's awesome.
And I just want to say one thing.
What's up?
Robert Downey Jr., bless your heart. That's all I have to say.
In our DJ, we pray.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for listening in. You can check out all of our shows and offerings on thegrandgeekgathering.com, and all of our podcasts are available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Stitcher, and any podcast app. If you can't find us, please let us know. You can also follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. I've been streaming on Twitch, and also we have our Let's Plays on YouTube. Once again, you can check out Josiah is Right, and all of the information will be in the article of the show on our website as well. And the show is also being posted on YouTube as well, because we talk about movies and film, and I think it would be nice for us to kind of have this on YouTube so people can watch it on different formats as well. Music has been provided by Carlisle Laurent. Please check him out on Fiverr. He is absolutely phenomenal. Come and join the gathering. Have a great week, and GGG.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
What's on the silver screen? I got some takes you wouldn't believe. Popmosis Film. Grand Geek Gathering.